Here we're going to look at two different ways of making patterns or swatches within Illustrator. So the first thing we're going to do is just go up to the top and click on Essentials Classic and then go to Reset. That'll give you the same sort of screen that I have here. So the first thing that we're going to do is just grab our rectangle tool. We'll just click once and that will allow us to give the dimensions of our rectangle, so we'll do a 1 by 1. It doesn't totally matter what size you make your rectangle to begin with, but I would do it at some known dimension. So don't just sort of drag a rectangle like this and then use that. So now that we have that drawn, we'll click on that and we'll go into our layers panel. We'll click the plus button to create a new layer, and then we'll drag up and that will move that to layer 2, and then we'll move layer 2 underneath, and that will allow this to serve as a background. So this is going to be what we use as our actual background for our swatch. So our pattern will fall inside of here, and then we'll repeat this as a series of tiles to allow us to make the overall swatch. So we'll click lock on that original layer and click back to layer 1. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to use some circles. So you can use whatever pattern that you'd like. Once I've finished drawing this, it may make more sense to do a sort of pattern in Illustrator or Rhino, but we'll go through the basic key concepts to making a pattern here. So we're going to grab this and we'll go ahead and just make a little circle here. We'll make that a little bit bigger. So what I'm going to do is for the pattern that I'm about to make, which is a sort of stippling pattern, I'm going to just go ahead and copy these. So if you hold Alt and Shift, that will allow you to copy these, and then you can align them on their center points to the corners of this. So the key to what we're doing here is going to be that we need the left edge to match up with the right edge and the top edge to match up with the bottom edge, so that when we tile this square, it'll always appear the same as it goes across the pattern. So some of the tutorials that I were using were these, which are by a woman named Tila Cunningham. This is sort of the first method that we're going over, so she goes a little bit more into how to get those edges to match up. For sort of architectural techniques, we usually use something that's relatively symmetrical, so a pattern like this is not terribly necessary, but she also has one on using the pattern tool within Illustrator. So those are good resources if you need them. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and just grab these two across the top, and we're going to go to Object, Blend, and Blend option, and we're going to click Specified Steps here, and we'll just do 3. We'll click OK, then we can go to Object, Blend, and we'll do Make. So we can see the shortcut there is going to be Alt-Control-B, so we'll blend those, and then we'll do an Alt-Control-B here, and that will also allow us to have those going across the bottom. I'm going to actually undo both of those, and I'm going to do an object transform, and we're going to scale here, and we're going to scale this down by, let's say, 75%. They're just a little bit large, and then I'll get rid of these, and we'll just go through, we'll hold Alt, and we'll copy these over to our corners like this. Now we can click on those, we can do Alt-Control-B, that looks a little bit better spacing wise. We'll do that across the bottom as well, Alt-Control-B, and then we'll click on this, we'll go to Object, Blend, and Expand, and then we're going to Object, Ungroup, and that will allow us to select them individually. You can see if we just select it once, it comes up as a whole blend group, so it says blend up here. So in order to get rid of that, we have to go to Blend, Expand. If we do that, it comes up as a group up here. And then if we go to Object Ungroup, that will allow us individual items. So we'll go vertically now, so Alt-Control-B, Alt-Control-B, and we'll just go across one by one. So other options for this would be to create a grid where you could actually just lay out the circles sort of from scratch. So here we'll click on that, we'll go to Object, Blend, Expand. We can actually do them all at once. So Object, Blend, Expand. And then if we select all of these and we go to Object Ungroup, now we'll be able to select individual circles here. So if we like this as our actual pattern, we can keep going. Another option would be if we wanted it to be sort of offset. So what we'll be able to do there is do something like this. So delete one off of each of them. And then if we scroll over here, we'll see that it'll actually snap to the center. So we're good there. And then we can snap that to the center as well. So we could do something like that. I'm going to go ahead and grab all of these circles, and we're just going to flip them from being a stroke to being a fill. So it'll be looking like something like this now. Now what we're going to do is we're going to grab all of these and we're going to do Control G, so that will group them all together. So if we click on them, they'll all be selected. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab my rectangle tool, and I'm going to make another 1 by 1. And then we're going to align this to my object that's underneath. So what we're trying to do now is we need to get rid of the information that's actually outside of this box. So we're going to click on this square, then we're going to hold shift and click on our group that's underneath. Then we'll go to object and clipping mask and make, and what that's going to do is that's going to yield something that looks like this. So the problem is you can see that a clipping mask still leaves information on the outside of this, so we can't have any of that for when we go ahead and make our swatch. So we're going to click on this, we're going to go to Window, Pathfinder, and we're going to click on this, which is our crop button, and when we click crop, you can see that now all of that information is gone from the outside. So when I click on this now, I can go into my swatches, so that's this one, and if I expand this out, you see that there's a little row here that doesn't have a lot of things in it. So if we just grab this and we drag that up into there, that will give us a swatch. So now when we go ahead and we draw a rectangle here and we click on the fill here and we click on our swatches, if we click that, that will actually map this entire pattern across here. So if we get done with this and we don't really like how it's scaled, what we can do is we can click on this and we can right click and go to transform, and we can go to scale, and you can see here that we have a scale and uniform. So let's say we scale it by 50%. If we uncheck transform objects and the only one we have is transform patterns, it will just transform what that pattern looks like inside of there. So this will allow us to get a much smaller, much larger variation of that original pattern that we had. From here you can go in and you can change your opacities, so we can do things like that in order to get the sort of look that we're going for. So that was the first method that we'll talk about. The next is a little bit easier. So if we select all of these, we'll just get rid of everything that we have here. We can go into our layers and we can actually unlock, we can delete this, and we can get rid of this layer. So the next method is going to be, we're just going to take a regular old circle. So we're going to figure out generally what size we want. So we'll keep it pretty small for now. We can make that a fill. I'm actually, for the sake of what we're doing here, I'm going to go ahead and make this a white fill. And because of that, I'm actually going to take that off to the side here just so that we can see what we're doing. So I'm going to have this be a white fill. So if we highlight this object now and we go to object, pattern, and make, it's going to give us this dialog. The new pattern has been added to the swatches panel, so we'll click OK. So what this panel is going to do when it comes up is this is going to tell us the general arrangement that we're working with. So if we don't want it to be in a grid, we can go brick, so that will give us that offset that we were talking about before. And then if we look at width, we can go, let's say 0.09, and we can change the width, so that's going to be our width, and then this is going to be our height. So if we do that, it'll be more of a square grid. Obviously if we go down from there, so if we go to 0.08, that will make it a little bit more of a squat type of grid. And then if we want to be able to see much more of them, we can go 9 by 9 to see roughly what that's going to look like. So this is obviously a much more easy way, especially if you're just going to be doing things with a single object. So once we X out of there, what we're going to be left with is a single swatch here that has our pattern in here. So when we go over to here, I'm just going to go ahead and move these up. If we look at this object and we're trying to give that a fill, if we click on that, it will give us that same fill that we had from the pattern that we just created. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and go to transform and scale. That's a little bit too big for me, so transform objects will uncheck, and we'll just make that, let's say, half the scale for now. Now we're going to look a little bit at layering here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a layer, and then I'm going to add another layer. So what I'm going to do is just move the information that's out front. I'm going to go ahead and move to that top layer, and then the information in the back will stay on the back layer. So what we can do here is we can just copy, let's go ahead and copy both of these out. So we now have 2 copies of them, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add another fill to this, so they'll both have the same fill. If we right click again, transform scale, uncheck transform objects, we'll click OK. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually get rid of that stroke. So if we go down here, we'll click on that, and then we'll click this none button. That will get rid of any kind of stroke that's in there. Any kind of fill. So if we go back to these, we're actually going to do the opposite. So we're going to go ahead and undo that. That wasn't what I meant to do. So click on that stroke portion and just click none here. And then the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to copy this again, and we're going to go in here and select both of these. We're going to give both of them just a white fill, so no stroke. Then if you go over to fill, we'll just give them a white. So let's go ahead and put a let's say a 20% white on these guys, and we'll go ahead and bring these down. We'll go ahead and align them with these. What we're going to want to do is click on both of these, right click, arrange, send to back. And what that's going to do is it's going to make our stroke pop from the front. So you can see here that now what we're getting is this piece that's behind this front piece now has a sort of faded outline, so that you can get this sense of depth from that. Now if we take these textures, let's go ahead and we'll also give those an opacity. So let's say we give those a 25% opacity, and we go ahead and move those down. And again, we'll right click, arrange, send to back. So now what we'll be doing is looking at something like that where we have some patterning that starts to happen within those. Again, you don't necessarily need these sort of white objects that are behind it. You can just do it with the texturing. So if we go here, let's actually say transform this again, we'll scale it, and again we'll go by 50%, and then if we right click on this again and transform scale, we can make that 50%. And then you start to get this sort of overlay of color. Again, you can do them solid, so if we did them solid, they would sort of look like this. Or you can do them with the pattern swatches either way. Or you can do a mixture of both. So that's how you create patterns and swatches in Illustrator. If you don't have this panel up, you can go up to Window and then Swatches. And if you don't have any of these colors, you can click down on here, go to Default Swatches, and then this is just under Print. So that's how you would get these back.